So again, we are happy to be assembled for Information Plus Hour. It's been a few months, and we are definitely happy to have with us again Ajanae Willis. You've seen her bio information, and as Brandy said, she's heard her speak a couple of times, so she's no stranger to us, and we're just happy to have her with us this evening. So you saw the information about what she'll be speaking about. So we'll allow her to go ahead and take it away, Ajanae. Thank you for being with us.
Dr. Parker, thank you very much for having me. And I'm so grateful for just all of the opportunities that you have given. It's amazing, you gave us so many opportunities as young historians to dream, to read. God, you made us read. I thank you for it, though. To write, to teach, speak, and even now that I'm in Texas at U of H, you still continue to provide me with opportunities. So, Doc, I give God glory for you, and I thank Him for you every day. Okay, so let me share screen here. Give me a moment. Okay, and will someone give me the thumbs up to let me know that you all can see this? Thank you. Okay, very good. Okay, let's let this load here for a second. Okay, so good evening, everyone. I'm Ajanae Willis. I am a PhD candidate in the Department of History at the University of Houston. Under the tutelage of Dr. Richard M. Mizell Jr., I study environmental and medical history. The larger umbrella of my research is Black towns and Black geographies. And underneath those, I record and chart those histories by way of the history of land usage, Black agriculture, disaster, weather, toxic air, water, soil pollution. And then derivatively, I look at the intersection that has on the Black body, on health, on wellness, also look at race and disease, and the intersection of climate change, energy, and health and wellness as well. So that's me. Today, I'm giving you all this presentation. Dr. Parker wanted it specifically about new executive orders. And so today, we are talking about the manifestation of mayhem. Okay, so this is called Manifest in Mayhem, New Executive Orders and the Waves of Malice Against Black Environmental Sovereignty. And I want to take the time to say this, right? Everyone that knows me knows that I'm really about the PSA life. So what this presentation really is, what my work is regarding this project is this is an urgent public service announcement to the people. We are under siege. It is a war on information that is being waged against us. And the reason why I say we're under siege is because siege is when an entity is targeting a once fortified geography in which they surround and inundate and overwhelm to bring that power down. And so I just want people to know that what is coming out in media, what is coming out in the academy that is connected to that media, what's coming out in legal spaces is all letting us know one thing: there is a war of information going on. So today I'm focusing this presentation very heavily on executive orders. And the reason why I'm focusing it on executive orders is because they are setting, well, redirecting socioeconomics, Black environmental health via legal pathways. And I just want to say that one of the things I'm saying to myself, to my comrades, is that scholarship has spent 40 years now since the 70s, post-civil rights, there has been an influx to drive the historiography towards social, the study of social and socioeconomic studies. What has happened on the far right is that while we were over focusing on that, and I'm by no means discrediting any of the work, we've done good work, but what happened on the far right is that they have been focused on the political. And this is why, as we turn the corner and reach the middle part of a tumultuous decade, we are reminded that we are behind plan-wise. And so that's what this is. This is a call to action. This is a public service announcement to let us know, to put myself in remembrance first, and to put you all in remembrance that it has been very clearly articulated that there is a war on information. So let's get started. First things first, I want to talk with you all about the power of the executive order. An order is exactly that. It's an order, right? It's a document that consolidates the power of the Oval. It takes powers that are happening day to day in slower ways, week by week, quarter by quarter, and it consolidates all that power in an immediate document that immediately directs, instructs, and commands. Some of the things we must know about executive order are the ways that this power is propped up. There are no specific verbatim provisions listed in the US Constitution. In fact, you will see action or will in a Constitution versus the word order in a lot of instances. So one of the places in the Constitution that allows for executive orders is Article 2, mainly sections 1, 3, and 4, in which it reads, the executive power shall be vested, right? That's a consolatory term, arguably. I'm pretty sure there are some JDs that would argue. In a president of the United States of America, the president shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed, right? And so statements like this in the Constitution show us that executive orders are rooted in the places where the roles of the US president are discussed, right? There's not really a section that says presidential executive orders, right, explicitly. So this is where that power is coming from. To continue that, one of the things that this alerts us to is that an executive order is not just a list of words. First things first, it establishes a start or an ending of a presidential priority. Priorities from the Oval are directly aimed to stimulate progress of all kinds of a group of people, and typically they identify ideas, right? Ideas that the presidential priority upholds, ideas that the presidential priority deems, adjacent to where they want to take this new direction. So that's the first thing we have to know. It identifies ideas. Second, it characterizes those ideas based on the ideas of the president, right? We have to constantly watch, and that's not just for this administration, that's for any administration. We have to watch the way and study the way that those ideas are characterized. The way ideas are characterized in documents like executive orders inherently it shows the inherent views of the president. Who do they deem as Americans? Who do they deem as anti-American? What do they deem as threats to their priority? The third thing is that it identifies actions, mechanisms, and/or mechanisms that uphold the ideas that bolster the presidential priority. And finally, but this is not the only thing, but just this is the final thing we'll discuss, it directs federal agencies to identify people or organizations funding, and mechanisms that uphold or are threats, all under the intention of stopping or starting actions that uphold presidential priorities. The second thing this alerts us to is that executive orders are able to consolidate power through the manipulation of time. First thing that it does is it can immediately bypass other forms of bureaucracy. This by no means mean that it cannot be overturned, because Congress does have a responsibility that is attached to executive orders to legislate for or against those orders. However, the ability for an executive order to take immediate action begins processes that then Congress or the courts, the other branches of government, have to then catch up to. So those things start working immediately, or they stop something from working immediately. In some cases, there are executive orders that in the past, quite a few executive orders in the past that articulate this is to start 30 days from now, a few months from now. So not all of them start immediately. We just, as American people, have to be alerted to the fact that they can be effective immediately. So again, when executive orders come out and the timeline is articulated, that can pose unique threats to any attempts to block them. So with that, I want to talk very briefly about some of the history of executive orders. All right, let me go back. Okay, so first of all, I want to articulate that historically, some of the most historic executive orders, the large majority of them, have been tied to either the creation or elimination of rights, powers, and authorities granted or denied to groups of people. There is a legacy in this country to utilize executive orders to directly impact rights and powers of individuals or groups or entities. This is something that we constantly have to keep an eye on, no matter who is in office. So the first thing I want to talk about is executive orders have been used by the majority of presidents. The first thing on the historical record that can be classified as an executive order was George Washington's letter to his cabinet on June 8th, 1789. In this, Washington demands, right? He directs and he instructs that all heads of his federal departments respond with full, precise, and a distinct general idea of their affairs as it pertains to the U.S. We can see here that direction and instruction come directly from executive orders. So it establishes precedent in terms of what a president prioritizes, and then it instructs what other federal entities must do as a result. So Washington writes this letter, and his heads are given a timeline to respond. What will their priorities be? These letters come back a few weeks later, and Washington goes through them and makes sure that they align with his presidential priorities. The next thing that is classified as an executive order is the Emancipation Proclamation. The Emancipation Proclamation issued a direction to redirect rights. And it reads, all persons held as slaves within the rebellious states are henceforward forever shall be free. I'm consolidating words. And what it did is it began an uptick in the use of executive wills, right? But I want to stop for a moment, and I want to have us reflect on the ways that these executive orders work pervasively around and through rights for Black Americans. These executive orders constantly reiterate the connection of power and specifically the power to bolster priorities around what is best for the U.S. In terms of the Emancipation Proclamation, this executive order was issued to parts of the U.S. South that was holding Black bodies in bondage. What the order did not do was provide rights and freedoms to territories that had already come under control by the North, or on territories that were where the North was beginning to have inroads. So the reason why I note this before I continue on is because, again, we have to remember that the information that comes out in executive orders moves around and through rights in a very pervasive way. They can grant, deny, all inside of the same document. And so they must be analyzed piece by piece to understand not just what the full document is saying, because we live in an age where we read a headline and that's it. But we have to go through and find out what the specific instructions are. Because again, the history is that presidents typically utilize, and I'm by no means saying the only executive orders that they utilize is towards the creation or elimination of rights for people. What I'm saying is that typically when creating precedent for how the nation will move forward in regards to that, one of the powers that is typically utilized is executive orders. So what the Emancipation Proclamation did was it initiated a new tool. Presidents before have used the executive order power. But it isn't until Abe Lincoln is attempting to restructure the way that the war is being fought, right? We remember Emancipation Proclamation was about trying to recruit Black soldiers into the Union Army, more so than it was about providing citizenship fully. Again, this is the ways that executive orders have been utilized to grant or deny rights to Black people. But this is the first time we register a number like 48 for executive orders. Abe Lincoln issues 48 orders. By the time we roll around to 1877, during the era of Reconstruction, right? This era in which the South is being reconstructed, arguably, Ulysses S. Grant leans into this power and drives up executive orders to 217. Ulysses S. Grant is pervasive in the way that he utilizes executive orders to initiate direction and instruction for military redistricting in the South, right? Bringing the South under this military authority. He's also very pervasive in the way that he utilizes this power to inhibit certain actions by the Klan, but allow for other actions. So again, we have a history of these orders granting and denying rights to Black people in a really strange and unique way. We don't see a president register over 1,000 executive orders throughout their administration until Teddy Roosevelt. By 1909, Roosevelt had issued 1,081 executive orders. And I want to continue the theme of executive orders being connected to rights and powers and authority as the federal government produces actions towards groups of people. Teddy Roosevelt was issuing executive orders that was responding to this new age of American imperialism in the Caribbean. He also issues executive orders that deny heroism from Black soldiers in the Spanish-American War, right? The Rough Riders, in which he says they were inherently dependent on white soldiers. Teddy Roosevelt also utilizes this power to ensure that during a time of American imperialism, this idea of expanding the power of America, that Black civil rights was left out of that. Executive Order number 8802, the prohibition and the discrimination in the defense industry, issued by FDR in 41, was the first time that we see an executive order being utilized to talk about race in a sweeping way, right? Whereas Abe Lincoln's executive order released Black folks from certain parts of the South from bondage, this order swept across an entire workforce. And so even when we see presidents that began to utilize executive orders to grant civil rights, we still see that they're very pervasive in the way that they grant and deny rights at the same time. Because FDR issued this to industries that were directly fueling war. So again, what we see is this give and take. And this really is what I'm articulating is one of the dangerous precedents set forth by executive orders. Because by the time 1965 rolls around, the Equal Employment Opportunity Executive Order number 11246 expands those protections to workforces across the federal government. And when Lyndon B. Johnson issues this, and it takes effect in 65, there are other efforts to ensure that while this executive order comes out in combination with the Voting Rights Act, that private industries are still able to control the way that they hire based on race in a really pervasive way. So what I'm getting at is the fact that people who are propping up the Trump administration's executive orders are more than well aware of the power to move throughout granting and denying human rights inside of these executive orders. And so I want to bring us up to the topic at hand, right, which is environmental justice. On January 21st of this year, the executive order ending, quote, illegal discrimination, and restoring, quote, merit-based opportunity was issued. One of the things that it revokes first and foremost is Executive Order 12898, issued on February 11th, 1994 by the Clinton administration. This order is entitled Federal Actions to Address Environmental Justice in Minority Populations and Low-Income Populations. This is the very first order that this administration overturned and revoked. Before it gets to this section in which it begins to identify which orders are being revoked, it identifies, and let me take us back, that Executive Order 12146 is considered illegal discrimination. And so I want to go back again to the fact that we've articulated the ways that executive orders mandate presidential priorities that must be responded to. The reason why Executive Order 12898 was the first one is because the environmental justice movement that Black Americans specifically have built, that started in Warren County, North Carolina in the 1980s, expanded environmental justice to encompass human rights. Those rights transcended civil rights. It wasn't just voting. It wasn't just access to public places and spaces or access to the workplace. Inside of Clinton's executive order on environmental justice, housing, health, education, work is all encompassing. And we'll get into certain parts of that. The second thing that this executive order revokes is Executive Order 13583, issued on August 18th of 2011. And what this order does is establishes a coordinated government-wide initiative to promote diversity and inclusion in the federal workforce. Once again, this directly, and I'm going to take us back, this is directly aiming at inhibiting actions that were permissible as a result of executive orders like the Equal Employment Opportunity Order. The third executive order that it revoked was Executive Order 13672, issued July 21st of 2014. And this makes direct mention of equal employment opportunity in the federal government. In fact, it is an umbrella revoking of several orders that deal directly with the opening of the workplace to Black Americans. What this executive order also establishes as a priority is not only that these protections are now considered illegal discrimination, but it directs institutions that are subordinate to the Oval to restore merit-based opportunity and practices. Merit inside of this executive order remains undefined. And so I want to talk about the specific threats that this begins to pose to the Black environmental justice movement. First, the reason why, let me take us back for a second. The reason why Executive Order 12898 comes into effect is a direct result of the progress won by the environmental justice movement in the latter part of the 20th century that was initiated by the PCB protests in Warren County, North Carolina in the 80s. What happened in Warren County was a Black community situated in that county received information that a facility in which toxic soil infiltrated with PCBs, these poisonous toxins that inhibit, they really act as neurotoxins. Soil laden with PCBs was going to be dumped in proximity to their community. Now, the problem with PCBs is that it is a chemical that continuously leaches into the air, and it can leach into groundwater and poison. Black communities in Warren County did not stand and take it. They stood up, they fought against it. But what this did in the midst of them doing this was it made national news, and it began to put them in a position by which they were able to work with scholars like Dr. Bullard at Texas Southern University and other environmental attorneys that could start the process of consolidating a movement. On the side of rights, this began to articulate that Black people in the environmental justice movement are not talking about civil rights. They're talking about rights that pertain directly to the overall holistic health and wellness of Black bodies in Black geographies. More specifically, I want to read more specifically some of the dangerous portions of this, right? Section 2-2 reads, federal agencies responsible for federal programs. Each federal agency shall conduct its programs, policies, and activities that substantially affect human health or the environment in a manner that ensures that such programs, policies, and activities do not have the effect of excluding persons from participation in, denying persons, including populations, the benefits of, or subjecting persons, including populations, to discrimination under such programs, policies, and activities because of their race, color, or national origin. Again, the section I'm reading from is a direct order coming out of Executive Order 12898, issued by the Clinton administration. The reason why I pulled this section is because what Trump's executive order is articulating is the idea of illegal discrimination. It is an idea that is initiating a war on information because one of the orders that it overturns directly is articulating specifically that no discrimination should be brought because of race, color, or national origin. But this executive order issued on January 21st is starting the process of legally codifying anti-white racism. Because what Executive Order number 12898 directed agencies to do as a result of Section 2-2 is to begin collection of data, analysis, and research on practices, the way money is being spent, and to initiate research projects that are studying environmental protections, that study the effect the lack of environmental protections are having on Black health, air, water, soil. Because Section 3-301 talks about human health and environmental research analysis, and further down the document, federal agencies are directed to begin collection of data on human health and environment, specifically all agencies in the federal government. So the EJ movement that was initiated by Warren County, this was one of their goals. Scholars like Robert Bullard began to write that the first priority that this part of the EJ movement had was to directly influence the federal government to acknowledge that hurt and harm is being done, to produce studies that prove that what the movement is articulating in oral history and personal experience is undeniable. So this executive order is a direct articulation to roll back not just practices that we have currently, but it's a direct articulation of the fact that the data from that is at risk. And so the next document I want to talk about is not an executive order. It's House Resolution number 987 that was issued the year before this. I want to take us back a little bit because I want to talk about where this bit of environmental disinformation began. Formally, right, this began in lots of channels like Discord on lots of far-right podcasts, right? The chatter amongst grassroots Americans and in far-right media began before January 31st of 2024, but it culminated in this House Resolution number 987. This resolution was brought to the floor by Representative Dan Newhouse, a Republican from Washington State. The title of it reads, "Denouncing the Harmful and Anti-American Energy Policies of the Biden Administration and for Other Purposes." Now, I want to insert a footnote here because I want to talk about why legislation on energy is so incredibly important to Black environmental justice movements. In my article that's coming out next month, I am talking specifically about plastic and plastic production because chemical building blocks of plastic, like naphtha, are directly pulled from substances like crude oil. And so one thing I always warn Black communities in the EJ movement about is the fact that even when environmental justice is not explicitly stated, one of the efforts in a Black EJ movement is via energy policy. And because we hear the word energy, we have to always maintain a position that this is not separate from Black EJ matters. And for the record, when I say EJ, I'm referring to environmental justice. Big energy, mainly big oil, so in my article that's coming out, I'm proving the connections between an increase in big oil production and plastic production. Big oil is a direct conversation inside of this House resolution because it articulates four main things. First, and this is from the document verbatim, it denounces the harmful anti-American energy policies, right, of the Biden administration. Second, it denounces the irrational and unpredictable federal lands policies of the Biden administration. Third, it condemns the energy crisis plaguing families, businesses, and Americans around the country that has been caused by the Biden administration. And fourth, it encourages the domestic production of reliable and affordable energy generation sources. So I want to start with number one. Number one and two, they're directly referring to Biden era policies that halt the utilization of federally protected lands from being places and spaces where gas and oil are being produced and or drilled for. But what this piece of legislation does is it takes propaganda and inserts it into a piece of legislation. Because first it identifies that as anti-American when those were federally protected lands, including national parks, are lands that are in proximity, not just to Black communities, but also the protections that they have allow for administrations like the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, to push federal funds to geographies to ensure that air, water, and soil is not being harmed. Those geographies are constantly monitored. This is an important thing for Black geographies to know. And so federally protected lands for big gas and big oil are code for not only expansion, but are code for drilling in places that are oil rich, that are also utilized by the American people on a consistent basis. So calling that anti-American when those protections extend to Americans that utilize those parks and live around those parks and other federally protected lands, right, which also includes places where federal buildings are located, is not always parks. It identifies that as a direct threat to the right's energy policies. The second thing that it does is it calls it irrational and unpredictable. When the Biden legislation that came out froze, it did not eliminate permits to drill for gas and oil, again, which is a toxic pollutant to Black communities. What it did was it froze it so that other permits could not be granted. So it did not even provide a circumference of justice. It was half-handed in that Black geographies in proximity to these places were protected from an expansion. But it excuses the fact that liquefied natural gas that's typically being pumped, liquefied, and exported overseas was already at an all-time high. And so the harm being done to Black communities was still in progress. But this piece of legislation propagates that not only is it anti-American towards right policies towards big gas and oil, but also that is unpredictable and irrational, posing a threat, thereby establishing the propaganda that an energy crisis exists. Now, the piece of this is that there's a part of the truth in that, and the rest is disinformation. There is an energy crisis in terms of the fact that energy prices are up. Prices that Americans are paying for water and for electricity that's powered by gas, right? Electric producing facilities are powered typically by gas. These prices are historically high for American families. And so this piece of legislation uses that as a means to articulate that an energy crisis consists of Americans paying high prices because the Biden administration has capped oil production. So it blends a piece of the truth with a lie that the reason that these prices are up is because production is down. When in fact, the calls to expand, and I'm at the bottom here, liquefied natural gas exports, the call to expand it is a call to expand it. But propping that call to expand it up on the lie that production is down has been overturned by studies that came out that same year, because that same year, the Department of Energy put out a study saying that if LNG, liquefied natural gas exports rates, which are at the highest, they were when this came out, if those rates continue their respective pace, by 2050, natural gas prices for consumers would be 4% higher than they were at the time this came out. I also want to note that a study done by the Bullard Center for Environmental Justice, newly opened in 2024, also identified that existing and plans for new LNG facilities are located in proximity to Black neighborhoods. So this call is a war on information about what is going on, who's being protected, and who's being harmed. So really quickly, I want to talk about the next executive order that is posing a danger to Black EJ movements. Executive order that was issued on January 20th of this year, Unleashing American Energy. Okay, I want to take you back really quickly. What came out of this House resolution was that propaganda was transferred into a piece of legislation, right? This came out in 2024. This piece of legislation initiates the idea that an energy crisis exists, and it provides the basis in which the executive order Unleashing American Energy comes out the next year. And it identifies that one, the goal is to encourage energy exploration and production on federal lands and waters, including the outer continental shelf, in order to meet the needs of our citizens and solidify the US as a global energy leader, which they already were, into the future, being to establish the US position as the lead producer and processor of non-fuel minerals, including rare earth minerals, which will create jobs and prosperity at home, strengthen supply chains for the US and its allies, and reduce global influence of malign and adversarial states. C, to protect the United States' economic and national security and military preparedness by ensuring that an abundant supply of reliable energy is readily accessible in every state and territory of the nation. This skirts the studies with an S that have come out that have shown that these kinds of exports were already at an all-time high, and they increased during the Biden administration, contrary to popular belief. So even that bit of information has been misconstrued, because this is propped up on propaganda that proposes that the Biden administration not only posed a threat to big gas and big oil, but that they were holistic in the ways that they were going about environmental justice movements. They were not, because under the Biden administration, and we can see here, the US rose. So under the latter part of Trump's administration, going into the entire Biden administration, LNG exports nearly tripled to 10 billion cubic feet per day. Okay, so the House resolution, in combination with that executive order on unleashing American energy, is also propping up the executive order that declares a national energy emergency that was issued on the 20th of this year. This order, sorry, I'm trying to move the top part of my screen here. Okay, this order transfers propaganda from both pieces of those documents and consolidates it in the Oval and articulates that it's an active threat to the American people from high energy prices. So we see that bit transferred over here, exacerbated by our nation's diminished capacity to insulate itself from hostile foreign actors. Energy security is increasingly crucial, is an increasingly crucial theater of global competition. The US was the highest, okay? Last year, the United States Department of Energy, as you can see here at the bottom, articulated that the US is the largest exporter of liquefied natural gas and consequently the #1 greenhouse gas polluter in the world. But this piece of legislation articulates that we have an energy emergency and that other countries are outproducing the United States, and it makes us over-reliant on other countries, okay? But what I wanna focus on is section 2 that talks about emergency approvals. And it directs that the heads of executive departments and agencies shall identify and exercise any lawful emergency authorities available to them, as well as other lawful authorities they may possess to facilitate identification, leasing, sitting, production, transportation, refining, in which all of those are in proximity to Black communities, and generation of domestic energy resources, including but not limited to on federal lands. So I want to keep moving here for the sake of time, but here are some of the executive orders, the two Trump era executive orders that came out in January articulating an energy crisis. Here are some of the ones they overturned that are immediate threats to Black wellness and health in Black geographies, and it is an immediate threat to the Black environmental justice movement. The first is Executive Order 13990, okay, that protects public health and the environment and restoring science to tackle the climate crisis. That's that same extension of an executive order, the revocation of certain executive orders concerning federal regulation, okay, tackling the climate crisis at home and abroad, President's Council of Advisors on Science and Tech, rebuilding and enhancing programs to resettle refugees and planning for the impact of climate change on migration. The propaganda exists that said refugees are foreign, which they are not. Studies have shown that in communities like Rolling Fork, Mississippi, one thing FEMA does that is very dangerous to Black communities is that after communities like Rolling Fork, after communities like what my dissertation is on, Princeville, after they experience disaster at a large scale, the federal government attempts to relocate them off of that land first. That's their first priority. Okay, Princeville was able to resist. Over 85% of Rolling Fork, Mississippi has been demolished by an F4 hurricane. Excuse me, not F4 hurricane, an F4 tornado in the last, I believe it happened 2 years ago. But what FEMA classifies as resettling refugees are Americans. This overturns the planning of that. It also overturned the executive order that established a climate change support office that bolsters data that directly records flooding and resilience plans for Black communities. Climate-related financial risk, which opened the door for studies that directly look at the impact climate change has on Black property ownership, overturned, catalyzing clean energy industries and jobs through federal sustainability. Articulating that the transfer of trying to reach net zero in terms of carbon emission has been identified as a threat. The implementation of energy and infrastructural provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act, right? A real threat to the ways that the Black EJ movement articulates the financial cost of being overpolluted. And finally, revitalizing our nation's commitment to environmental justice for all. And it's 6 o'clock, so I'm going to keep moving really quickly. The final thing I want to say is that what this legislation has done, coupled with anti-DEI legislation, and I want to take 30 seconds to talk about anti-DEI legislation. Though DEI is not an entity that has helped Black Americans more than other groups like white women, it has been weaponized explicitly against Black Americans as though it is created just for them and by them. And so what anti-DEI legislation has done, all of which was issued via executive order, it has set the precedent that any piece of policy or practice that can be perceived as pro-Black can now be investigated as anti-white. And what that has also done, because we talked about executive orders and the way it works with time, is it has frozen money that directly impacts grants that's going towards Black environmental justice movements, going towards studies. It has also frozen the data that goes along with that. And so literally we have entire studies that were conducted, because remember, these studies were initiated with the 1994 Clinton executive order. Many of these studies, like the Social Vulnerability Index coming out of the CDC, have disappeared. The HIV index, which studies are starting to come out that HIV being a virus inherently dealing with DNA, that symptoms can be exacerbated by pollution because pollution affects and we're starting to see its ability to manipulate DNA structure. Maternal morbidity and the mortality index, studies that directly affect Black environmental health in terms of Black maternal health, because a study came out last month from, I can't think of the university, but if you want it, email me, in which Black women that were having babies prematurely, they studied the sacs that the children grow in when inside of the body. Over 50% of the ones that were marked as having prematurely been birthed, over 50% of them were found to be inundated with microplastic. And so studies like the Justice 40 initiative that direct federal funds towards Black communities from the EPA have disappeared. The Black EJ screen has disappeared. And I just want to note that some of these have come back online, but are missing substantial portions of data. So this is a war on information. And my last question is, where are you in this war? Are you on the sideline or are you on the front line? And I'll end right there. Thank you all.
Absolutely awesome. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Ajanae. Wow, that's some terrible. I don't know. It's worse than I thought. It's worse than I thought.
I know.
It's an assault. It's an assault on the senses. They don't care.
And I just want to note.
Pure.
My apologies. I just want to note that again, and I'm not trying to like prop myself up, but we need the information, right? My article on plastic pollution is coming out next month. What I'm doing inside of the article is more policy analysis, and I'm proving the connection that energy policies have towards plastic production and plastic pollution inside of Black communities. I'm charting the history of us being in and it's very brief. It's a report, it's not an article, so it's extremely brief. I'm charting the history of us being in proximity to air and water pollution. I am by no means saying that there are not other communities affected, but what I'm saying is that the data is proving that polluters choose to move in proximity to Black communities over white communities because of the connection that race has to property values. It's also proving that Black communities are singularly over inundated by overpollution. And so my question in my article is, if basically I'm exposing inconsistencies, because if big gas, big oil, LNG production, plastic production, if they are utilizing race as a mechanism to determine where they will place their facilities, then how dare people in our federal government taking our tax dollars tell us that race cannot then be utilized to alleviate that pollution? And so the final thing I'll note is that there are scholars now to wiggle around that are calling for that data and those federal agencies to continue to conduct those studies and push that money towards Black communities via zip code. but we know zip codes tell the story of race. And so what I'm articulating and warning us about is that what happened in this last election on both sides, because when it comes to Black environmental health, civil and human rights, education, neither side has done due diligence by Black people in this country. And so what I'm articulating is that the first casualty of war, I'm the daughter of a Black 82nd Airborne man that came out as an E9, did 3 tours in war. The first casualty of war, my father always told me this, is the truth. What happened in this last election was not that one side lost, one side won. It's the fact that propaganda is believed and it's making its way into policy. And it is directly being propped up. I want to make this note. Project 2025 that is driving these policies is being directed by a white historian that studies Black history and has utilized that to distort the Black identity and call movements to alleviate issues for Black American anti-American, when the science, when the history, when the geography, when the religion, when everything that is guarding truth and knowledge and wisdom is saying that these things are a lie, our policies are beginning to be inundated with propaganda that is explicitly anti-Black. And so I just had to put that out there.
Madison, see your hand is up.
Yes. So, sorry, I am driving. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear and see you.
Okay. First of all, I just want to say amazing talk. You know, I learned so much from our regular Friday morning coffee conversations, right? So I already knew coming into this talk, I was going to learn even more. I want to ask the question, since I work with organizers and we are constantly making connection to grassroots organizers now, what does it look like to be on the front lines? From your last slide, what does it look like to be on the front lines? What can grassroots organizers do in order to kind of combat all these things that are happening, you know? Because I think, in a sense, some people believe and feel with these executive orders as they're coming out, it's little that they can do. Oh, well, Congress isn't doing anything. Well, we can't do anything, right? So what does it look like to be on the front lines? What would you tell grassroots organizers in rural North Carolina, in these rural places within the South, when it comes to this subject?
That's why you're my best friend. One of the best public friends I know. I love you and I'm so happy to see your face. First of all, to be on the front lines is to articulate your position first and foremost. Are you with us or are you against us? And what that looks like is this. Tubman said that she couldn't celebrate getting folk off the plantation, which is a state-sanctioned corporate-like entity that has bolstered the way big American business has been built. She said the folks didn't know the condition they were in. They knew, they experienced it, they lived it. But you have to know that you are actively in a position where folks are literally working against you. And it's not a victim mentality. It's a realization of the efforts being brought against you. The first thing people need to do at a grassroots level to be on the front lines instead of the sidelines, you got to know the lie from the truth. Because operating in a state of misinformation, disinformation, a lack of information, the people perish because of what we don't know. That's Bible. We have become unable to differentiate a lie from the truth. So we need to be able to identify and stay informed. We cannot afford to turn our eyes away from policy. It's in your wallet, it's in your community, it's in your water, it's in your refrigerator, it's in your doctor's appointments. It's everywhere. The first thing you got to do to remain on the front lines is you got to know when you're on the side. And you have to get off via information. And you got to start checking. We have to tell our grassroots organizations, the war on information is on. You have to be reading. You have to be reading. Policy, you have to be reading what's going on. And we must stay on top of this. Far-right propaganda came out that kept Black people from voting in historic numbers. If we don't like candidates, get them off the ballot. Get the people you want on there. Or if they're not, write in. And we also being on the front lines looks like we need to get our local elections back under control. Who is in locally? So first, being on the front lines looks like you got to know the information, and you have to know you're at a disadvantage if you don't have the information. We have experience all day. And I understand that the hell that's coming out of DC is causing us to say, God, I just need to look away from this. But we can't. They're not looking away from us. We're at the top of their legislation at all times. So first, information. Second, local elections. We got to get some power. We have power. We have to consolidate it. If we don't like candidates, get them out. Also, we have to bolster our own institutions. We're not waiting on them to fix theirs that never fully helped us. We're bolstering our institutions. That looks like church. That looks like education. That looks like any social clubs. That looks like any economic things we're doing in our community. Because we are the best people to protect us. And so I'll leave that piece at that, because I could go on. I have more. I have more, but I'll leave it at those.
Other questions or comments?
Ms. Willis,
Sorry.
this is Beverly Payne. I hope you can hear me.
I can.
I'm a member of the Okanichi Band of the Saponi Nation, and I would like to know if you've ever heard of 7 Directions of Service.
I think I have heard of it, but I'm not.
It is run by tribal member Crystal Cavalier Keck, and it's based on the rights of nature, particularly water. People that I talk to or have been talking to and who will listen, I'm always talking about plastics. And I think that it's gotten to a point right now that we need to stop the making of plastics. Nobody's talking about that. They're talking about how much it is and how it deteriorates really the world. But we need to start answering. I get emails all the time from a lot of elected officials asking for money. I think we need to start showing up with our elected officials if we're not going to run. The front lines are the front lines. That means you got to show up. And thank you for this wonderful presentation.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Payne. Are you Dr. Payne? Excuse me.
No,
Okay,
no.
I'm like, we don't play about the DR. I know. Okay, so I always try to ask. But first and foremost, I want to say thank you for being a keeper of that kind of historic communal knowledge. You are absolutely invaluable. And I thank you for being that link in the chain that is passing that information down so that my generation can continue this work. And I want to let you know that if you all need anything, call me, email me, because I exist in this space to support communities. So please let me know what I can do to support you all in your efforts. And I do want to say that in my article on plastic, I am articulating the shortcomings of Biden era administration alongside Trump era administration, because at the same time that the Biden era administration was articulating that by 2050, they want single-use plastics gone, crude oil and LNG exports, which we know is the chemical foundation for plastic production, increased nearly 4 times. And
Right.
so there's a loophole. No one is talking about the fact that plastic is killing us.
Correct. And one of the things that I'd like to mention is that the pipelines that we thought were gone with this administration are back with vengeance. And one of them, the Mountain Valley pipeline, was actually coming through Alamance County. They moved to satisfy the Occaneechi Band of the Saponi Nation. But guess what they're going through now? They are going through the historical and archaeological dig of the Upper Sorrowtown. And a lot of people don't know about that, because a lot of people don't even know about Upper Sorrowtown.
We need to talk about this. Yeah, I need your email after this, please, Mrs. Payne.
Okay, I will put it in the chat.
Thank you. There's a question that I'm going to take. I don't mean to cut you off, Mrs. Payne.
That's okay. I'm good.
And we're going to talk. We're going to circle back. Do you like tea? I hope you do. We can have virtual tea. Okay. So Emily says, how can we preserve the data and make sure it survives and gets disseminated? First of all, we cannot wait on federal entities, administration after administration. They handle their priorities. We have to handle ours. We have to know whether they are scholars, trained in the academy, or they're keepers of knowledge in the community. We need our own entities that we are not handing over to the feds. One of the debates that exists around the African American Museum in DC is, how far should we go in letting communal relics, data, and knowledge be that far away from us, right? What's our cutoff? Whatever institutions we're sending our data to, if we're not controlling them, respectfully, we need to share with them when we can, but we need to be in control of our data. Because as administrations change, their priorities change. And so we have to get back to communal data sharing. And one of the ways we do that is by rebuilding institutions like Black churches, reformulating organizations that we had that were collecting data, even if it is just Black knitting circles, Black quilt making circles. We are preserving our own data in all these really unique ways. One of the best places to find records is the Black church. One of the best places to find records are Black newspapers, all of these things. We have to leverage our own data in our own communities. And I know that we like federal recognition, we like this, we like that, but the tide turns. And when we get an administration that is aiming to do what we think we are asking them to do, they're not doing all of it, because pro-Black has been propagated as American, as though we are not inhabitants of this land. So that's my question. Let me make sure there are no other questions.
Felton, you had something, your hand was up at one point. You still have a question?
I probably was applauding Dr. Parker, but I did want Ajanae to know that, Ajanae, we did a grown folks business after, I think it was after the election or maybe after the debate between Harris and Trump. And you actually shared time with Dr. Cavalier on one of those. You might not recall, but yeah, you've actually spoken with her before.
Want to know that I'm by no means, and see, this is sad that I have to do this, but I'm going to do this because the giants that raised me academically and in my family have had to do this. So I'm going to say this. I am by no means calling for violence. I am only drawing attention to the intellectual and holistic violence that's being waged on Black communities. There's not a place on the record where they can prove that we were violent towards other communities at the rate that our communities took violence. And I just want to say that, but what I am calling for is for us to get to a place where we are creating institutions that we control, that bolster our data, that we can leverage power, because we have to insulate our communities from changing federal policies. They're going to always change. And so we have to start looking internally. They're going to always change. That does not mean by any means that we take our eye off what's going on federally. It doesn't mean that we stop showing up and participating. It just means that on the back end, we need an intellectual USB drive that we can always have. And so that's what that means. We also have to support our people that are doing this work. A lot of the scholars that I read for these executive orders are Black judges, Black JDs that are doing this every single day in firms, that are talking about the legalities and the threats that are posed and that are challenging these things, that are upholding better definitions of what real justice looks like, what equality doesn't look like, because it's not equity, right? And so we also have to know all of the people. There are artists doing this work. There are scientists doing this work. There are Black grandmothers sitting on their porch doing this work because they're teaching. You got all the grands at your foot and you're teaching this. There are pastors doing this work. There are parents doing this work. There are, of course, historians. There are people all over that are doing this work. We have to know who they are, because what was shown in this last election, the media isn't going to show who the leaders are. One thing that happened in this election is that younger generations of both conservatives and Democrats and moderates, people that belong to the Forward Party, the Green Party, our generation as a whole, because on average, we typically believe in climate change. Young conservatives are like, what are we going to do about this? This is not fiscally conservative. Because climate and race has been the dividing line across both parties. because it poses threats to big gas, big oil, which no one is calling for them to be, no one is explicitly targeting them. We're talking about problems, and we're talking about federal protection. We're not leaking their data. We're not doing all of these things. So I just wanted to say that.
Are there other questions or comments? Well, it's a lot to think about, but more importantly than thinking about is absolutely going out there doing something about it. We need to become more active, without a doubt.
And Dr. Parker, I would love for us to share on, like have one of these specifically for solutions. Because I have, we can talk about those as well.
Okay.
But right now, I'm warning us, but keep open mind though.
Yeah, no question about it. Are there any other questions or comments for Ajanae? Ajanae, we thank you.
I'm sorry, Dr. Parker. I do have one. Sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
Ajanae, I wanted to ask, so a lot of the material that you covered, it's pretty complicated subject material. For some people, me, I'll say for myself, for sure. So when you're learning about these executive orders and you're going through policy, because it can be very difficult to understand what's being said because of the way that it's written, do you find that, like, are you actually getting more out of just going straight to the executive order or to the policy, or do you also have certain people that you because I know you mentioned some of the Black judges that are writing on these things. Like, are there people that you specifically seek out that can kind of pick these things apart and make it more digestible for people who aren't, experts at this type of stuff?
So for me, this is a new project, so I have not gotten there yet. However, I will say this. What that sometimes looks like is, even if I don't call, text, or we meet, I look at their work. Because one of the things that we have to have the people that can speak legalese, right? We have to, it's a whole, it's an entirely different intellect. Like, it's a whole, they function at a different frequency than we do. But I haven't gotten there yet. So all of this is just from me. And I have to say, I'm a woman of God, so I got to tell you that I consort with the Spirit all the time. And that's not me. I just got to acknowledge my God, Brandy. I'm not putting anything on you. I just have to do that. But I must say that I was trained by an authority on the U.S. Constitution, Dr. Parker. And so my graduate career at Central was court cases. What else, Dr. Parker? Because it was court cases. Yep. It was the Constitution. Verbatim, it was the Constitution. It was also looking at the social impacts, right? Bridging policy with practice. Parker would train us on that. Okay, this is what the letter of the law says, but what's being done? So I do have to say that I was just trained by an authority on race and the Constitution, Brandy. But I am getting to the place where, like my article, I'm getting to the place where I absolutely need to build a team. Madison knows it. Quite a few people on this knows that I need to do that, because I recognize that this work is so holistic that a team is warranted. And we need some JDs on there, and we need some folks that are on the bench on there. But I'm very interdisciplinary, so that's, yeah. But thank you. The tip I can give you, and the tip I can give to us, is you have to sit with it. You can't just read the policy one time. And I do have comrades that have been to law school. It's like what we do in history. You have to go back and keep going back and keep going back. And you have to make notes. And then you need to find some talks with some people that can speak legalese, that are talking about this, are writing about this. And also you got to read some dissent. You have to read court orders. You have you gotta spend some time and get through it. And so it's holistic. Find out what's being said. One of the ways that I study propaganda, you gotta, and Felton can speak to this. Felton is an authority on Black media. He's off, but yeah, you gotta see what's on paper versus what's on the news. And then when people mention stuff, click that PDF. Click the PDF. Don't just listen to what they said about it, right? I drop executive order numbers so that you can go and read them. So, yeah.
Well, thank you for the questions. Thank you for the comments, and definitely thank you, Ajanae, for an outstanding presentation. Our next Information Plus Hour segment will take place on May 7th, Wednesday, May 7th. And another one of our former students, Dr. Phil Rubio, who is a professor at A&T, that other university up the road, will actually come and speak to us. Phil wrote a book 20 years ago on white affirmative action, entitled Affirmative Action 1619 to 2000. And so he told me last week that the Trump administration is just continuing to give him so much fuel. And so he wants to come and share that with us on May 7th. But other than that, good people, look forward to seeing you again on May 7th, and surely before then, if you're coming to class. And Ajanae, thank you again. And Ajanae, will you stay on for just a few minutes, please?
Well, yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, good people, y'all take care. Madison, be careful out there driving.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, take care now. Madison, be careful out there.
She was flying.
Looked like it. Ajanae, I'm so proud of you, my dear. You just said that was just so beautiful. Absolutely. You know, I was sitting there.
You make me cry.
I said, if I were going to give this presentation, I would have done it exactly the way you did it. I said, Ajanae stole my presentation. Honestly, I mean, the historical, the historical background, and then just bringing it from the top down to, oh my God, it was absolutely beautiful.
You trained me, Dr. Parker.
I didn't have to do very much training, I can tell you that. That was
Thank you. No, you trained me.
My wife was sitting behind me, and she said, oh my gosh, she is great. Oh. She is just so good. She knows her stuff now.
Oh, and there's so much coming from y'all, truly. You know, to hear someone who taught you and mentored you say, this is good work.
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent. I really appreciate it so much. And these folks really had their eyes open tonight. They just, most of them surely just didn't know about this. And so hopefully, and somebody asked me whether or not it's going to be available. So I told them in a few days I'll edit it, and definitely it'll be up on YouTube if it's okay with you.
Yes, it will be.
Okay.
I'm very thankful. And I just want to tell you, because you know, this is what God would have me to tell you. The student never surpasses the teacher.
Oh, yes, they do, babe.
But what we do, even when we do surpass, it's not really, it's building on what you've done.
It's
right?
standing on the shoulders of.
Yes.
All right, yeah, definitely standing on the shoulders of. I think about that every single day when I think about my professors, Carl A. Jones and Shirley Thorpe and Helen G. Edmonds. Never
Yeah,
surpassed them, but I definitely stand
exactly.
on that.
That's what I mean. You know, the work that we do gives God the glory for what he's done in you. God, everybody you train, we are able to differentiate the truth from the lie.
Yeah, exactly.
And look at how it's serving us now.
Yeah.
So I just, when I say I thank God for you, because I know y'all fought some hell.
Oh yeah, no question about it.
To stay in and to keep doing that work.
Exactly.
You to know that these are the fruits of your labor too.
Well, thank you. Great.
Yes.
That's great. Absolutely great.
It is.
Yeah. And so you have a class right now, right?
They do, yeah. They're wait. They know to wait though.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, dear. Hang in there, okay? I wish I had $1,000 to send you, but I send $1,000 in love.
You know, the money, when it comes to us, you will never, ever, ever have to do that. You have given me so much more than money.
Well, definitely when you come to town, we're going to lunch.
Yes.
Lunch. Yeah.
I look forward to starting to take you to lunch too.
How about that? You take care now.
You're blessed, Dr. Parker.
All right, you too. Bye-bye.
All right.